My name is Arya Thorne. I'm 19 years old, and I was born and raised in the quiet, misty city of Astoria, Oregon, a place where the Columbia River meets the Pacific and the air is perpetually scented with salt, damp earth, and the faint, sweet smell of Douglas firs. All my life, I've been the girl who lived more in the pages of books than in the world outside my window. I was the keeper of quiet dreams, chasing perfect grades not just for the thrill of learning, but as a way to carve out a space for myself, to escape the long, cool shadow cast by my family's unshakable favoritism. My parents, David and Catherine, have always looked at my older brother, Liam, as if he held the sun in his hands. I was the moon, content to orbit, reflecting a sliver of his light. But I had my own star, a fixed point in the celestial map of my future, Brown University. When the thick, cream-colored envelope arrived, it felt heavier than paper. It was a promise, a tangible piece of my future, smelling of new beginnings and lecture halls filled with the rustle of turning pages. That April afternoon, I was in my attic bedroom, the sloped ceilings making it feel like a sanctuary, carefully taping a Brown University pennant to the wall above my desk. My heart was a hummingbird in my chest, fluttering with a joy so pure it felt like flight. I could already feel the crunch of autumn leaves on the Providence sidewalks, the satisfying weight of a history textbook in my arms, the thrilling anonymity of being someone entirely new. My course catalog lay open on my bed, its pages softened with use, corners dog-eared and passages highlighted in a hopeful shade of yellow. It was a treasure map leading to everything I had ever worked for. I was so lost in a description for a seminar on medieval literature that I almost missed the strain in my mother's voice when she called up the stairs. "Arya, darling, could you come down? Your father and I need to talk to you." I trotted down the creaking wooden stairs, the happy buzz still humming in my veins, assuming it was about something mundane, dinner plans, a question about summer. But the atmosphere in the living room was wrong. The air, usually filled with the scent of Mom's potpourri and the low murmur of the television, was thick and still. Dad was sitting stiffly on the floral sofa, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white, as if he were physically holding himself together. Mom was perched on the edge of the armchair, her smile a thin, brittle line that looked like it might shatter. The room felt suddenly claustrophobic, the familiar patterned wallpaper closing in on me. "Sit down, sweetheart," Dad said, his voice a low rumble, stripped of its usual confident boom. A cold, heavy stone dropped into my stomach. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my own voice sounding small and distant as the bubble of my joy began to thin. Mom reached for my hand, her palm icy and damp despite the warmth of the spring day. "Arya, there's no gentle way to put this," she began, her gaze skittering away from mine. Dad cleared his throat, cutting her off. "It's about your college fund, honey," he said, the words coming out in a practiced, level tone that made my skin crawl. We invested it. We saw a business opportunity, a venture we were certain would pay off handsomely. We wanted to grow the fund for you, give you even more of a cushion." He paused, and the silence that filled the space was vast and suffocating. "The venture failed. We lost it. All of it." The words didn't land like a punch. They were more like a slow, creeping poison, seeping into my bloodstream, paralyzing me from the inside out. "All of it," I whispered. The brown pennant flashed in my mind, a cruel, mocking banner. My future, all those sleepless nights, the meticulously crafted essays, the sacrifices, it all dissolved into a gray, formless mist. Brown, the tuition, the dorm room overlooking the green, the life I had earned, gone. My voice cracked, a tiny, splintering sound in the heavy silence. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Mom's grip on my hand tightened, her eyes shimmering with tears that refused to fall. "We are so sorry, baby. We feel just terrible," she murmured. The words felt hollow, rehearsed, like lines from a play she'd been forced to memorize. I pulled my hand from hers, a deep ache spreading through my chest, as if my heart were physically caving in. "What am I supposed to do now?" I asked, the question hanging in the air between us, a ghost of the dreams that had filled the house only moments before. Dad shifted on the couch, his posture straightening, his tone becoming unnervingly practical. A gap year could be a wonderful experience. Or there's always Portland State. It's a solid university. You could live at home, save a significant amount of money. Portland State. After Brown. The suggestion was not just a downgrade. It was an erasure of everything I was, everything I had strived to be. It was a slap in the face. So you're saying I can't go? I managed to say, my voice trembling, on the verge of shattering completely. Not this year, sweetheart, Mom said, her voice soft and placating, as if the gentleness of her tone could somehow cushion the devastating blow. We're stretched so thin right now. At that exact moment, Liam sauntered into the room. At 22, he radiated an effortless confidence that had always eluded me. He was scrolling through a brand new, top-of-the-line smartphone I'd never seen before, a sleek black rectangle that seemed to absorb the light in the room. "What's with the funeral vibes?" he asked breezily, his eyes flicking from my tear-streaked face to our parents' grim expressions. "We were just telling Arya about her college fund," Dad said, his voice heavy with a regret that felt manufactured. Liam winced, a theatrical display of sympathy. "Oh, right. That investment thing. Tough break, sis," he said, giving my shoulder a light, dismissive pat. "But hey, you're the smart one. You'll figure something out." As he turned away, I caught it, a flicker of something in his eyes, a brief, almost imperceptible upturn of his lips before he composed his features back into a mask of casual concern. I stared at the three of them, a tableau of betrayal. Dad, with his forced solemnity. Mom, with her practiced, shallow sympathy. And Liam, with his barely concealed glee. The stone in my stomach grew heavier, colder, threatening to pull me down into the floor. I mumbled something about needing some air, about needing to be alone, and stumbled back up the stairs, their muffled voices trailing behind me, talking about making the best of a difficult situation and resilience. Back in my room, the brown pennant seemed to mock me from the wall. I sank onto the edge of my bed, the tears finally coming, hot and burning, a release of the grief and rage that was choking me. My future had been stolen. But beneath the overwhelming tide of sorrow, a cold, hard knot was forming in my gut. Something about their story, the smooth, rehearsed delivery, the convenient timing, felt profoundly wrong. And Liam's smirk, that wasn't the look of someone surprised by bad news. That was the look of someone who had just won. The days that followed the explosion were a surreal blur of forced normalcy and hollow reassurances. My mother began referring to the obliteration of my life stream as our little setback, a phrase she'd use with a strained, bright smile, as if my future were a minor household inconvenience, like a leaky faucet or a stained rug. She would pat my arm, her touch light and meaningless, her voice a syrupy, sweet stream of platitudes. "Don't you worry your pretty little head, Arya. We'll get this all sorted out." My father, on the other hand, took a more direct, pragmatic approach, offering unsolicited career advice that felt more like a punishment. A job at the cannery could build character, he'd said one evening over a silent dinner. Character. As if I lacked it. Meanwhile, I'd lie awake in my attic room, the sound of the distant foghorn a mournful counterpoint to the racing of my thoughts. I replayed that scene in the living room over and over again, dissecting every word, every gesture, every flicker of an eye. The more I examined it, the more it felt like a poorly rehearsed play, a performance for an audience of one. Liam was the most damning piece of evidence. He moved through our modest Astoria home with a new, swaggering confidence. A brand new laptop appeared on his desk, a high-end tablet was always in his hand, and he was never without that gleaming new phone. He was a walking, talking showcase of expensive technology. One evening, I was curled up on the window seat in the upstairs hallway, trying to lose myself in a novel, when I heard his voice from his room, loud and brimming with an excitement he didn't bother to conceal. He was pacing, the floorboards creaking under his feet. Yeah, the seed money is officially in the bank, he crowed into his phone. We're talking next-level AI integration. It's going to be a total game-changer for the logistics industry. Seed money. The phrase echoed in the quiet hallway, and my stomach twisted into a painful knot. My college fund, the one my parents had spoken of in reverent tones since I was a child, the one they'd assured me was sacrosanct, had vanished. And in its place, Liam, my perpetually project-driven, financially inept brother, was suddenly flush with cash for the tech startup he'd been fantasizing about for years. The equation was brutally simple. I finally broke down and told my best friend, Zoe Thorne, everything. We were sitting on the damp, weathered pier behind her house, the gray expanse of the Columbia River stretching out before us, the air thick with the smell of low tide. I picked at a loose thread on the cuff of my worn cable-knit sweater, my voice barely a whisper against the cry of the gulls. It just doesn't make any sense, Zoe. They claim it was a bad investment that wiped them out, but Liam suddenly has all this money. He's been trying to get this startup off the ground for 2 years, and he's never had a dime of real funding. Until now. Zoe's wide, hazel eyes grew even wider. Her ceramic mug, filled with steaming tea, froze halfway to her lips. No, she breathed. Arya, they wouldn't. Your own parents. I swallowed against the bitter taste that rose in my throat. Liam has always been the golden boy. You've seen it. I've been the quiet one, the self-sufficient one, the afterthought. Growing up, our mantelpiece was a shrine to Liam's mediocrity, participation trophies from his short-lived soccer career, a blue ribbon for a science fair project I had practically done for him. My academic awards were tucked away in a box in my closet. Dad would listen to Liam's half-baked business schemes with rapt attention, while my ambitions were treated as quaint hobbies. Mom would gush about Liam's supposed charm, conveniently ignoring his trail of broken promises and unpaid debts. I was the one my grandmother, Helen, had always championed. Helen had seen them all so clearly. She understood Dad's reckless optimism and Mom's blind devotion to her son. During her summer visits from her small cottage on the coast, she would pull me aside, her hand warm and steady on my arm, her gaze direct and full of a fierce love. Arya, don't you ever let anyone else steer your ship, she'd say, her voice firm. That mind of yours is your compass and your sail. Don't let them beat you. I clung to those words now, her voice a beacon in the fog of my confusion. The cold knot in my gut tightened, hardening into certainty. The final, irrefutable proof came late one night. I'd crept downstairs for a glass of water, my footsteps soft on the old floorboards, a habit born from a lifetime of trying to be unobtrusive. As I passed Liam's bedroom, I saw a sliver of light beneath the door. I paused, my hand on the banister, as I heard voices from within, low, conspiratorial whispers. It was my mother, my father, and Liam. The last of the wire transfers cleared this afternoon, Dad said, and I could hear the smug satisfaction in his tone, a sound I knew all too well. Your startup is fully capitalized now, son. Every last cent from her fund is in your account. My mother let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound that was almost giddy. Oh, David, you're a genius. It was the perfect story. And Arya will be fine. She'll land on her feet. She's always been so resilient. Resilient. They spoke the word not as a compliment, but as an excuse. A justification for their theft. My resilience was the asset they had counted on to absorb their betrayal without complaint. The glass I was meant to get slipped from my mind. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, and I backed away from the door, my movements silent and robotic. I retreated to my room, the sanctuary that now felt like a cage, and closed the door without a sound. The air in my lungs felt like poison. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion, it was a cold, hard, undeniable fact. They hadn't just lost my future, they had actively, willfully stolen it, and handed it to my brother. And in that moment, the grief that had been weighing me down for days began to burn away, leaving behind something else entirely. A cold, quiet, calculated rage. In the aftermath of that whispered confession, a profound shift occurred within me. The heartbroken girl who had wept for her stolen dream was gone. In her place stood someone I barely recognized, a person forged in the fires of betrayal, her grief tempered into a steel-like resolve. They thought I was resilient, a quiet plant that could be trampled and still survive. They were about to discover that resilience could also be a root system, powerful enough to break concrete. My grandmother Helen had passed away 2 years prior, leaving a void in my life that I felt every single day. But she had also left me something else. A small, unassuming key and a letter, which I had tucked away in my jewelry box. For a rainy day, my dear Aria, her elegant script read. A real storm, not just a drizzle. When you need it, you'll know. The key belonged to a safe deposit box at a small, independent bank in a neighboring town. The next morning, telling my parents I was going to the library to research financial aid for Portland State, I drove my beat-up old Honda Civic, the one I'd bought with 4 years of summer job savings, and let myself into that quiet, climate-controlled vault. Inside the box was a thick file folder. The contents made my breath catch in my throat. Helen, with her incredible foresight and her deep-seated mistrust of my father's schemes, had established a trust in my name. It wasn't just a savings account, it was a fortress. And the keystone of that fortress was a document that made my hands tremble, a deed of trust. Years ago, she had loaned my parents a significant sum of money to prevent foreclosure on our house after one of Dad's business ideas went south. Instead of a traditional loan, her lawyer, a man named Elias Croft, had structured it as an investment, giving her a 1/3 ownership stake in the property. A clause written in dense legalese stipulated that if my designated educational funds were ever misappropriated or diverted for non-educational purposes by the primary residence, her 1/3 share of the house would transfer directly and immediately to me. Helen had seen this coming. She had anticipated their recklessness, their favoritism, and she had built me a lifeboat. The next day, I had an appointment with Mr. Croft. He was an older gentleman with kind eyes and a calm, reassuring demeanor that immediately put me at ease. I sat in his quiet, book-lined office and laid out the whole sordid story, the lie about the investment, Liam's sudden windfall, the overheard conversation. I pushed the documents from the safe deposit box across his polished mahogany desk. He read through them slowly, his expression unchanging. When he finally looked up, he nodded, a small, sad smile on his lips. Your grandmother was a very wise woman, he said gently. And a very fierce one. She loved you a great deal, Aria. He tapped the deed of trust with his forefinger. This document is ironclad. They have violated the terms of the agreement. As of the moment they transferred that money to your brother, you became the legal owner of 1/3 of their house. 1/3 of the house. It wasn't just leverage, it was a sledgehammer. It was the key to my escape. What about Brown? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He gave me another kind smile. Your grandmother also left a separate portfolio of investments for you, untouched by your parents. It's not enough to cover all 4 years at Brown, but it's a start. A start was all I needed. That afternoon, I went online and found a scholarship I'd dismissed months ago, a full-ride merit scholarship to the University of Colorado Boulder, focused on environmental studies, a passion Helen and I had shared on our long walks through the coastal forests. The deadline was in 3 days. For the next 72 hours, I'd barely slept. I poured all my rage, my hope, and my pain into that application, writing essays that were sharp, passionate, and deeply personal. I sent it off with minutes to spare, my heart pounding with a wild, desperate hope. While I waited, my life became a clandestine operation. At home, I played the part of the defeated daughter. My mother would leave brochures for Portland State's creative writing program on my pillow. This looks just perfect for you, darling, she'd chirp, her cheerfulness grating on my raw nerves. My father was more direct. One evening, he slid a stack of federal loan applications across the dining room table. "These are for Portland State," he announced, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We've already filled in most of the information. You just need to sign." I looked at the papers, at the crushing weight of the debt they represented, a chain that would bind me to them, to this city, to their betrayal. I looked up, meeting his expectant gaze, and gave a small, resigned nod. "Okay," I said softly. "If it's the only way." The relief that washed over his face was so profound it was almost comical. "That's my girl," he said, patting my shoulder. "We'll get through this together." They thought they had me. They thought they had won. But every condescending smile, every patronizing pat on the head, only fueled the fire of my resolve. My real life was happening in secret. I began the slow, methodical process of extracting myself from the house. Under the guise of a massive spring cleaning project, I packed boxes of books, clothes, and personal keepsakes. I told them I was donating things to Goodwill. In reality, I was ferrying my life, piece by piece, to Zoe's garage. She asked few questions, her quiet, unwavering support a balm to my wounded soul. "Are you sure about this, Arya?" she'd ask, heaving a box of my favorite novels into a corner. "I'm sure," I'd reply, my voice steady. My bedroom grew sparser, more anonymous, but my parents, wrapped up in their own drama and the celebration of Liam's glorious future, never noticed. Then, the email arrived. It was from the University of Colorado Boulder. "Congratulations," my hands shook as I read the words. A full scholarship. Tuition, room, and board. It was real. It was happening. That night, I sat at my desk, the same desk where I had once mapped out my future at Brown, and wrote the letter. My hand didn't tremble. The words flowed out of me, a torrent of righteous anger and newfound strength. "You didn't lose my college fund in a bad investment," I wrote. "You stole it. You stole my dream and handed it to Liam to fund his. You called me resilient as an excuse to betray me. You thought I would just quietly accept it. You were wrong. Grandma Helen saw you for who you were. She knew this might happen. I'm leaving. I've accepted a full scholarship to the University of Colorado Boulder. As for the house, Helen's 1/3 share is now legally mine. My lawyer, Mr. Elias Croft, will be in touch." I sealed it in an envelope. Next to it, I placed a crisp, notarized copy of the legal notice Mr. Croft had prepared, a document that would detonate the foundations of their comfortable life. I was no longer a moon reflecting their light. I was a comet, blazing my own path across the sky, and I was ready to leave them in the dark. The day I chose to leave was a perfect, crystalline spring day in Astoria. The air was washed clean by an overnight rain, and the sun, a rare and welcome guest, cast a golden glow over the harbor. It was the day they believed their victory would be formalized. The Portland State loan papers sat on the kitchen counter like a trophy, a testament to their successful manipulation. My mother was practically giddy, humming as she watered her houseplants. My father, over breakfast, clapped me on the back and said, "We're so proud of you for being so mature about this, Arya. It shows real character." Their smiles were too bright, their relief too palpable. They saw me as a problem solved, a loose end neatly tied. They had no idea that my bags were already packed, my old Honda parked a few blocks away at Zoe's house, and that a letter sat on my desk like a time bomb, its pin already pulled. Dinner that night was an exercise in supreme self-control. It was an excruciating performance. Mom chattered endlessly about Liam's latest progress, describing a pitch meeting he'd had with potential partners. Dad nodded along, peppering the conversation with business jargon like synergy and market disruption. Liam, my brother the burgeoning tech mogul, smirked at me from across the table, his new designer watch glinting under the dining room light. I ate my food in small, measured bites, nodding when spoken to, a storm of emotions raging behind my calm facade. My mind was already on the open road, on the miles of highway that stretched between Oregon and Colorado. "I think I'll turn in early," I said, pushing my chair back from the table. Long day tomorrow. That's right, sweetie, Mom beamed, her eyes shining with triumph. You get a good night's rest. We'll sign those papers first thing in the morning. I waited. I lay in my bed, fully clothed, listening to the house settle. The creaks and groans of the old structure, once comforting, now sounded like a prison. The clock on my nightstand ticked past midnight, each second a small step towards freedom. Finally, when the house was draped in a profound silence, I slipped out of bed. My backpack was light, containing only the essentials: my wallet, my phone charger, the CU Boulder acceptance letter, and the thick envelope with Helen's documents. I moved through the dark house like a ghost. On my perfectly made bed, I left the 2 envelopes, stark white against the dark blue of my quilt. I took one final, sweeping look at my room. The bare shelves, the empty walls where my posters used to hang. The brown pennant was still there, a relic of a dream I had been forced to trade for something harder, truer. This wasn't my home anymore. It was just a house, its foundations built on a scaffold of lies. The front door latch clicked softly as I eased it open. The night air was cool and damp, smelling of the river and of liberation. I did not look back. I walked the 2 blocks to Zoe's house, where my car was waiting, a key hidden under the mat. The engine turned over with a familiar, reassuring hum. As I pulled onto the highway, heading east, the road opened up before me, a dark, endless ribbon leading me toward my new life. The adrenaline coursing through my veins was mingled with a strange, deep calm. I had done it. I had broken free. The letter would be their morning's first light, and the legal notice would be their reckoning. For the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel tight. I could breathe. The immense weight of their betrayal, which had been pressing down on me, crushing the very air from my lungs, began to lift with every mile that disappeared behind me. As the first hints of dawn began to streak the Oregon sky in shades of pink and gray behind me, I allowed myself to picture it. My mother, calling up the stairs, her voice bright with that false, chipper tone. "Aria, breakfast. Time to get those papers signed." The silence that would follow. Her growing irritation as she climbed the stairs, my father grumbling behind her about my lack of punctuality on such an important day. They would push open my bedroom door and find it empty. The unnerving tidiness, the bare walls, the missing books. Confusion would curdle into a cold dread as my mother's eyes landed on the envelopes on the bed, my name written in my own sharp, clear handwriting. I could see her hand trembling as she tore it open, my father leaning over her shoulder to read, Liam probably lounging in the doorway, annoyed by the delay. My letter would lay it all bare. "I know you stole my college fund for Liam's startup. You lied to my face and called me resilient to absolve yourselves of the guilt. And then, the final blows, I've secured a full scholarship to a university in Colorado. Grandma Helen's trust gives me legal ownership of 1/3 of this house. Mr. Croft will be in touch." The legal notice lying beside it, stamped and official, would hit them like a physical force, knocking the air from their lungs. By the time I crossed the border into Idaho, my burner phone, a cheap, prepaid device I'd bought with cash to avoid being tracked, began to buzz. A relentless, frantic series of notifications. "Mom, Aria, where are you? Call me immediately. This isn't funny. Dad, you answer your phone right now, young lady. You have no idea what you're doing. Liam, what the hell is this letter? You're trying to ruin everything for me. You selfish little brat." I let the calls go to voicemail, a bitter, triumphant smile touching my lips. Their panic was a distant, staticky noise, fading with every mile I put between us. Later that day, a text from Zoe buzzed through. "Zoe, OMG Aria. They found it. Your mom called my mom, absolutely hysterical, sobbing and incoherent. Your dad is screaming. And Liam is completely losing his mind about his funding. What did you do?" I pulled into a dusty gas station somewhere in Wyoming, the vast, empty landscape a world away from the misty Oregon coast. I took a deep breath of the dry, clean air. Their world was imploding, just as I had intended. That morning, as promised, Mr. Croft had a process server deliver the official legal notice to their front door. It wasn't just my letter anymore, it was a binding legal claim. Helen's legacy had sprung the trap. They would have to buy me out of my 1/3 share, or the court would force a sale of the property. And with every cent of my stolen college fund now sitting in Liam's startup account, they had no liquid assets, no way to pay me. Their comfortable life in Astoria, their carefully constructed social standing, was beginning to crumble. I dropped the burner phone into a trash can, severing my last link to them. I was already halfway to a new world. Colorado was a revelation. It was a world painted in primary colors, a stark and stunning contrast to the muted grays and greens of Astoria. The sky was a piercing, impossible blue, and the Rocky Mountains loomed on the horizon, not as a barrier, but as a promise of strength and permanence. The campus of the University of Colorado Boulder was alive with an energy I had never experienced before, a vibrant thrum of students laughing on sun-drenched quads, of passionate debates spilling out of classrooms, of professors who saw the fire in my eyes and challenged me to make it burn brighter. I threw myself into my studies, declaring my major in environmental science, a tribute to the long, rambling hikes Helen and I used to take through the Sitka spruce forests. I joined a campus sustainability club, finding a tribe of people who were as passionate about healing the world as I was. I made friends, real friends, who knew me only as Aria, the girl who could talk for hours about watershed management, not as Liam's little sister or the Thorns' quiet daughter. For the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere. My small studio apartment, paid for by the scholarship, was my sanctuary. It was tiny, but it was mine. From its single large window, I had a view of the Flatirons, their rugged peaks a daily reminder of the resilience of the natural world and of my own. I carefully unpacked the few treasures I had brought with me, a handful of my favorite books, a small, framed photograph of Helen and me on a beach, her arm around my shoulder, both of us grinning into the wind. Her love was a tangible presence in that little room, a quiet strength that settled my soul. Zoe's texts became my window into the wreckage I had left behind. They arrived less frequently as I settled into my new life, but each one painted a clearer picture of the consequences of my parents' actions. "House is on the market," one read. "Mr. Croft is handling everything. Your dad tried to argue with him, apparently got very loud. Croft didn't even blink." Another, "A few weeks later, they're moving. Found a rental on the other side of town. It's a small duplex. Nothing like the old house. Liam had to move back in with them. His fancy downtown office lease is up, and he can't afford to renew." The house, their castle, and the symbol of their middle-class security sold quickly. Mr. Croft, with quiet, unassailable efficiency, managed the closing. My share, a check for just over $180,000, was deposited into a new trust account, managed by a financial advisor he had recommended. It was a foundation, a safety net built by Helen's love and my own courage. It was untouchable. Their social world, so carefully curated within the tight-knit, gossipy circles of Astoria, was unraveling. The whispers started. How could the Thorns afford to send Liam to launch a startup, but not send their brilliant daughter to college? Why had they suddenly sold their family home? My father, in a desperate attempt to control the narrative, began telling people I was a troubled, ungrateful child who had stolen from them and run away. But Helen and Mr. Croft had planned for that too. Mr. Croft sent a few discreet, carefully worded letters to key figures in their social circle. Their pastor, the president of the local business association, obliquely mentioning his role in amicably resolving a complex family financial matter involving the misappropriation of a minor's educational trust. The tide of rumor turned. Suddenly, my parents were the ones under a cloud of suspicion, their reputations tattered. Liam's fury was the most satisfying element of the fallout. Zoe told me he'd called her one night, drunk and belligerent, ranting for 20 minutes about how I had single-handedly destroyed his future. His seed money was locked up, his credibility shot. Potential investors, spooked by the whispers of family financial scandal, had vanished. "He actually tried to call you a bunch of times," Zoe texted, "but I guess you blocked his number." I had. His startup, a glittering mirage built on the sands of my stolen dreams, had evaporated. And as I read her message, I felt a sharp, cold, clean satisfaction. It wasn't glee in his misery, but a sense of cosmic justice. They had gambled my future on the belief that I would be their silent, long-suffering collateral. They never imagined that Helen's foresight had armed me to call their bluff. I was free, breathing the clean mountain air, building a life of substance and purpose, while their world, built on a foundation of lies and entitlement, collapsed under its own weight. One cool Colorado evening in my final semester, I stood on a brightly lit stage in a university lecture hall, the wood smooth beneath my hands on the lectern. I was clutching a certificate recognizing my honors thesis, a comprehensive research project on sustainable urban planning and riverine ecosystem restoration, as the year's outstanding work in the department. The applause from the audience washed over me, a warm, genuine wave of affirmation. My friends were in the front row, cheering wildly. I had poured every ounce of myself into that project, driven by the same quiet, intense fire that had propelled me out of Astoria. As I smiled out at the sea of faces, I thought of my mother's words, a ghostly echo from that terrible night. "She'll manage. She's resilient." They had meant it as a dismissal, a convenient excuse to justify their unforgivable actions. They had used my strength against me. But they were right, in a way they could never possibly comprehend. My resilience wasn't about quietly enduring pain. It was about transforming it. It was about taking the broken pieces of the life they had shattered and forging them into something stronger, something more beautiful, something that was entirely my own. Helen's love had been my shield, and her wisdom my sword. Without her, I might still be in Astoria, tethered to their lies, weighed down by loans for a life I never wanted. Instead, I was here. The Thorns' world had been permanently downsized. Liam's grand startup had become an embarrassing footnote in his history of failures. Their house was a memory, their socials standing a ghost. I'd heard through Zoe that they rarely went out anymore, their pride keeping them prisoners in their small, rented duplex. They had tried to break me, to shrink my world to fit their own small narrative. In doing so, they had unleashed me. There was still a quiet ache, a hollow space where a family should have been. A soft, lingering grief not for the family I lost, but for the one I now knew I had never truly had. But that sadness was dwarfed by a fierce, soaring pride. I had faced their betrayal and had not only survived, but triumphed. My future was mine, carved out of the mountain of their lies with the tools of my own grit and the undying power of my grandmother's love. Their better investment in my brother had yielded nothing but ruin. Mine, the one I made in myself, was just beginning to pay its dividends. To everyone who has walked with me through this story, thank you. You have been a quiet witness to the darkest moments and the brightest dawns. If my journey has resonated with you, perhaps you can share it with someone else who feels trapped, who needs to be reminded of their own strength. Keep forging your own path, especially when the people closest to you try to block the way. I am out here, under a wide and hopeful sky, building my future one day at a time. And I hope, with all my heart, that you are building yours too. I'll see you on the other side.